In social psychology, under module 7, we would be discussing on impression formation. The objectives under this are the concept related to impression formation, under which purpose of theory, definition of impression formation, research by Solomon Asch and primacy effect, social categorization and implicit personality theories. To discuss the purpose of the module, we need to revise the concepts of social psychology and social perception. So, the field of social psychology, it looks at the behavior and mental processes, but includes as well as the social world in which we exist, as we are surrounded by others to whom we are connected and by whom we are influenced in so many ways. Social psychology is the scientific study of how a person's behavior, thoughts and feelings influence and are influenced by social groups. So, social perception again, it refers to the construction or constructing and understanding of the social world from the information we get through our various senses. So, it can be narrowly stated that the process by which we form impressions of other people's traits and personalities, it's termed as social perception. Hence, it is very important to concentrate on how we perceive others and form our first impressions of them, as well as we explain the behavior of others and ourselves. So, the impressions we form and manage or control the impressions others form about us are the basis for more meaningful and reciprocal self and interpersonal relationships in social life. Since we live in a world filled with people and interact with others on a daily basis, such interactions provide ample opportunities for the presence of other people to directly or indirectly influence behavior of each individual. So, there are many forms of influence. In fact, the mere presence of others, whether real or merely implied, can even influence the way people perceive, understand, interact and perform tasks successfully or unsuccessfully. So, in this module, following Asch theory, the well-researched concepts explained in the coming section of this module are the factors that influence process of information formation. So, they are first impression, social categorization and implicit personality theories, followed by their implications as primacy effect, stereotypes and halo effect that are discussed in detail. A precise description of each of the tactics related to self-presentation or impression management with benefits at self, group and organizational level is made. Now, definition of impression formation. So, impression formation is the forming of the first knowledge a person has about another person. Impression formation is one of the components of social cognition, in which the cognition results from the processing of mental representations. Now, what are mental representations? They are hypothetical internal cognitive symbol that represents external reality that people use to discern or understand of the world around them. So, this process of organizing varied informations into a unified, collective, whole impression of the other person is called impression formation. It is the fundamental to person perception. People make the inferences about others, events, situations and objectives as effective or ineffective or mediocre in quality by gathering information from physical appearance, primacy effect, stereotype, schemas and communication of both the types, verbal and non-verbal. Now, the research on impression formation. It's basically we would be discussing about Solomon-Asch research, specifically on central and peripheral traits. Now, there have been many researchers working in this area of social cognition, social influence and social perception. One of the critical areas to be researched was impression or mental representation, which seemed to be quite effortless. On the contrary, Solomon-Asch in the year 1946, one of the founders of experimental social psychology, he stated that people look at a person and immediately form a certain impression of his character in them. Based on first glance, few words shared and other such experiences, we do form unified impressions of even a highly complex matter. So, Solomon-Asch set out to study the same problem. How do people manage to do this? So, the famous experiment supported that there is a tendency among people to conform to majority opinion than their commitment to what they perceive to be true. Now, there is an experiment, two lists of words like intelligent, skillful. So, there are some 8 to 9 words, you can see this, in which more or less there are similar words except for warm or cold. So, the above two lists of words that differ only with respect to two words, that is warm, which means friendly, altruistic, and cold, indifferent and unfriendly. So, these are two words which are not similar when compared to the other. So, there should not be much difference between the people exposed to these two lists. However, this was not the case. People in first list containing warm were much more likely to be viewed as generous, good-natured, sociable and altruistic than were people in the other list concerning cold. According to Asch, the words warm and cold were central traits. Now, what are these central traits? The dispositions that strongly countered, generally influential, easily identified, which shape the overall impressions of the stranger and colored with other adjectives in the list. Here are the other being peripheral, which may not imply many other characteristics. So, Asch concluded that forming impressions of others involve more than simply combining individual traits. So, there will be a strong attempt to form an impression of the person as a whole, and more than two traits belonging to the person are understood. They cease to exist as separate traits and come to interaction and enter into relation with each other. The research on impression formation has definitely become far more sophisticated since Asch's early work. Many of his basic ideas about impression formation have withstood the test of time. So, thus his research exerted a lasting impact and is still worthy of careful attention even today. So, following Asch's time-tested experiment and with lasting impact, now let us discuss about the factors that lead to impression formation and how they influence people's perception. So, there are first impression and primacy effect, social categorization and stereotypes, and implicit personality theories and the effect of primacy effect, stereotypes and halo effect on them. Now, to begin with, when a person meets another for the first time, it is the first opportunity either person will have to make initial analysis, evaluations and judgments about the other. The first opportunity is a very important one in impression formation. Now, modern research studies have reported that even working with what are known as thin slices of information about others, that means it refers to small amounts of information about others we use to form first impressions of them. For instance, photos or short videos, perceivers' first impressions are reasonably accurate. Now, according to Gray, people form better first impressions of some characteristics than others, but overall they can accomplish this task fairly well with quick and better than chance accuracy. One possibility is that their level of confidence in their judgments plays a role. Greater their confidence, the more accurate the impressions. Now, accuracy of first impressions increases with confidence in them, but only up to a point, beyond which it declines. So, should we trust our first impressions of others? The best answer seems to be to some extent, but always remembering that they are far from completely accurate and we can't judge their accuracy very well. The bottom line then appears to be to approach first impressions with caution. During the first meeting of a person with another person, the observer goes through a process of concept formation. Now, what are concepts? Concepts are ideas that represent a class or category of objects, events or activities. People use concepts to think about objects or events without having to think about all the specific examples of the category. It can be said that there is a primacy effect in impression formation. Primacy effect is a tendency for facts or impressions that are presented first are better remembered than material presented later in the sequence. The first time people meet someone, they form an impression of the person, often based on their physical appearance alone, that persons, even though that may later have contradictory information about that person. This is a proven fact that first impressions have a strong and excessive influence on later impressions or evaluations called first impression bias on that person, events or objects. Social categorization. Now, one of the processes that occur when people meet someone new is the assignment of that person to some kind of category or group. Now, social categorization is an automatic, natural cognitive process by which we place individuals into a social category or groups. Now, forming impressions includes assigning the other person to a number of categories that portrays about what that person is likely to do. It's like prediction or forecast. Social category is a group of people categorized based on a social class or other common attributes of a social nature, such as culture, gender, homelessness, race, unemployment or retirement, sometimes age as well. Thus, the categories direct the process of prediction or forecast. Now, according to McRae and Bodenhausen, this assignment is usually based on the characteristics of the new person has in common with other people or groups with whom the perceiver has had prior experience. So, this social categorization is mostly automatic and occurs without conscious awareness of the person. Now, social categorization can result in a stereotype as well. That is, a set of cognitive generalizations or beliefs and expectations about qualities and characteristics of the members of a group or category or shared by all members of a particular social category. Now, stereotypes are group schemas here that indicate the attributes, characteristics and behaviors that are typical of members of that social category. So, these social or group schema often underlie the beliefs, behaviors within a group context, particularly larger group or societal groups. For example, a particular culture like American culture uses wide variety of stereotypes of different races, Asians, Hispanics, Africans, etc. Religious groups like Jews, Protestants, Catholics and ethnic groups like Germans, Greeks, Indians. Although this is a natural process because human beings are just born categorizers, sometimes it can cause problems, especially when the characteristics used to categorize the person are superficial or improperly attached to certain ideas, such as red hair equals to bad temper. It may lead to misjudgment and cause problems. Add to the process of stereotyping to the primacy effect and it becomes easy to see how important first impressions really are. The first impressions not only has more importance than other information gathered about a person later on, but may include a stereotype that is resistant to change as well. Now, here it sounds as though we would be better off if people did not use social categorization. No, social categorization does have an important place in the perception of others. It allows people to access a great deal of information that can be useful about others, as well as helping people to remember and organize information about the characteristics of others. Now, the way to avoid falling into trap of negatively stereotyping someone is to be aware of existing stereotypes and apply a little critical thinking. Now, next concept, implicit personality theories. Now, what is implicit? Implicit means suggested or understood, though not plainly expressed personality theories are sets of assumptions that people have about how different types of people, personality traits and actions are related, and these theories are formed in childhood only. Cronbach, Dweck and other researchers, they have introduced the concept of implicit personality theory in which the concept of generalized other is stated. Here, the concept of other reflects a person's beliefs about the attributes and abilities that a typical individual exhibits and how attributes and abilities are interrelated as well. Thus, the categories into which people place others are based on something called an implicit personality theory. So, these theories, which can be viewed as a specific kind of schemas or mental patterns, suggest that when individuals possess some traits, they are likely to possess others too. So, such expectations are strongly shaped by the cultures in which we live. For instance, in many societies, of course not all, it is assumed that what is beautiful is good, that people who are attractive also possess other positive traits such as good social skills and an interest in enjoying good things in life, etc. Although these assumptions or beliefs are not necessarily true, they do serve the function of helping to organize some schemas or mental patterns that represent what a person believes about certain types of people. Social psychologists use the term schema to denote a well organized structure of cognition about some social entities such as a person, group, role or event. Schemas usually include information about an entity's attributes and about its relation with other entities as well. Of course, there are several distinct types of schemas, including person schemas, which are cognitive structures that describe the personalities of others as specific. For example, introvert, extrovert or type. Self schemas refer to structures that organize the conception of our own characteristics. Now, group schemas, they are termed as stereotypes. They refer to schemas regarding the members of a particular social group or social category. Role schemas refer to attributes and behaviors typical of persons occupying a particular role in a group. In event schemas, they refer to scripts regarding important recurring social events. Here, person schemas especially are cognitive structures that describe the personalities of other individuals. So, there are several distinct types of person schemas. Some other person schemas are very specific and are pertain to particular type. Other than person schemas are very abstract and focus on the relations among personality traits. So, a schema of this type is an implicit personality theory, that is an unstated assumptions about which personality traits are correlated with one another. Now, these theories by Sternberg, Grant, Holmes, they include beliefs about the behaviors that are associated with various personality traits. They are considered implicit because in everyday life we usually do not subject our person schemas to close examination, nor are we implicitly aware of their contents. As do all schemas, Implicit personality theories enable us to make inferences that go beyond the available information. So, we can depict an implicit personality theories as a mental map indicating the way traits are related to one another. So, the schemas formed in this way can easily become stereotypes, that means group schemas. When people have limited experience with others who are different from them, especially in superficial ways with such as skin color or other physical characteristics. So, this tendency for our general or overall liking for a person to influence our subsequent assessment of more specific traits of that person is called the halo effect. Of course, this is introduced by Latchman, Bass and Thorndike also discussed about this effect. So, the halo effect produces bias in impression formation, mostly positive traits. It can lead to inaccuracy in our ratings of other traits and performances too. So, what is halo effect? It is the tendency for general or overall liking for a person to influence subsequent assessment or more specific traits of that person. There is a test designed to measure the implicit attitudes that make up one's implicit personality theory called implicit association test or IAT, and this is developed by Greenwald and Banerjee. Now, this test asks to classify a set of words or images into groups. So, the goal of the test is to classify items as quickly and as accurately as a person can. So, some evidences suggest that implicit personality theories may differ from culture to culture as well as from individual to individual. For example, one study found that Americans in Hong Kong and Chinese people have different implicit personality theories about how much the personality of an individual is able to change. Now, Americans assume that personality is relatively fixed and unchanging, whereas Chinese people native to Hong Kong assume that personalities are far more changeable. According to Anderson, people combine all information into a weighted average in which each piece of information about another person is weighted in terms of its relative importance. The subfactors identified which lead to impression formation according to Anderson are source of information, that means different sources of information in which few are weighted more if the information comes from trusted sources than we distrust. Next, nature of information, generally negative information is weighted more than positive. Next, the extent to which it describes unusual behavior traits, because unusual information is weighted more than usual information. Next, primacy effect, information received first is weighted more heavily than information received later. Next, recency effect, if the perceiver chooses to pay attention to all the information and not just the first information, thus processed may have a stronger influence, followed by halo effect. The tendency to think that a person who has a set of positive qualities must also be having the other associated positive qualities. For example, if we think that a person is punctual and well dressed, he or she will be hardworking too. Recent research findings about the components of impression formation. Now, there are two major components of impression formation. There is a growing evidence suggests that both exemplars and abstractions, they play a role in impression formation. Now, what is exemplar? Exemplars, when impressions or judgments are formed about others, we recall those traits or behavioral characteristics often observed in them as the base for such judgments. So, the most observed actions are the exemplars of the trait, and we include that trait in our first impression of him or an example of an exemplar is a person that others try to imitate, such as a popular person, an actor whom we have often observed, or a leader, something like that. So, abstractions, when judgments are made about others, we bring our previously formed abstractions. Abstractions means here ideas to mind, and then use these as the basis for our impressions and our decisions. If we have previously judged as friendly or unfriendly, kind or unkind, and then combine these traits into an impression of this individual. So, this is about the recent research work done on impression formation. So, dear students, so far we have discussed about definition of impression formation and the factors leading to impression formation, such as first impressions, social categorization and implicit personality theories, and the implications of these three concepts, followed by the recent research. Of course, we have discussed about Solomon Asch research as well, followed by the recent research works as well.